welcome you back to the program. Gerald Celente, he's an American trends forecaster. He's the publisher of the Trends Journal. He's a business consultant, he's an author, and he's a frequent guest here at the Next News Network. Gerald, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Gary, thanks for having me on.
Gerald, let's start off with the Trends Journal forecast for 2016. Economist Albert Edwards says the U.S. stock market will fall 75%. How deep do you think it's going to fall?
Well, you go back to our forecast we made on August 6th, 2015. It's there for everybody to see. I said the markets were going to unravel this year, and we're going to go into a crash. And I also said on December 30th, our headline for our Trends in the News broadcast was the panic of 2016. So did the market unravel and crash last year as I predicted? Yes. It doesn't crash overnight. When I made that forecast, the Dow proceeded to lose 1,000 points after that and closed out the year on a down note and opened up the year continuing on the down note to the worst week, the first New Year's week in recorded history.
Wow.
Following that, oil prices down 11%. Can it go down the S&P 75? Yes, it can. I don't put numbers on how low it can go, but what we are saying, it's more than a 20% correction. And from that, it'll keep sliding, because the only thing that propped the markets up, and we wrote about it as it happened back in 2009, this is no recovery, it's a cover-up. They covered it up with quantitative easing and zero interest rate policy, and you can see the results. It's not a conspiracy theory or a thought process that does not have fact behind it. We saw in 2015, for example, the greatest levels of mergers and acquisitions in history, plus stock buybacks. So the whole stock market growth was nothing more than an artificial bubble.
So, Gerald, I do want to get into QE in just a moment here, but how do you think that the stock market crash is affecting Americans?
It's very funny. It's very different this time because the people aren't in the markets like they used to be. Most of them are, you look at the jobs being created. It's not as though people are playing the markets. So they don't have that connection to it as they used to. They're so far removed from it. So the psychological impact hasn't hit them yet. It will, because the market decline is really nothing more than a reflection, and it hasn't been reflecting, of one of our top trends, and that is a global recession. Gary, when I mentioned that oil prices lost 11% in the first week of trading in the new year and continue to go down, and then you read the media from the business world and the mainstream, they tag this decline on two basic reasons: China, slowing economy, and oil.
Right, and I want to talk about that because the UK Financial Bank Standard Chartered said that we think oil prices could fall to as low as $10 a barrel. How do you think that's going to affect commodities?
Again, that's what I'm trying to say. It's not oil. It's everything.
Mm-hmm.
You look at iron ore. It was selling for over $200 a ton in 2011. It's going for around $40 now. Copper, nickel, zinc, corn, wheat, soybeans. The commodity index is at 1999 levels and falling. It's a global slowdown. So by looking at China and oil, they're making it, 1 and 1 is 2. It's bigger than that. This has been going on for a long time. The only reason it kept going on, again, going back to quantitative easing, all of that cheap dough went into the emerging markets. They were borrowing money for nothing. So now we go back to the bubble bursting. It's the bond bubble. Put back oil into it and energy and mining. I mentioned how low the commodity prices are. Then you look at the junk bonds when they had zero interest rate policy. People flooding into junk bonds. Some 20% of the junk bonds in America are oil and mining related. And now you're seeing the energy sector collapsing,
right now,
as well as the bond prices.
So Arch Coal just filed for bankruptcy as prices are plunging. So are we also now seeing a collapse in the coal and oil drilling?
Exactly. But here's the other thing, by the way, with the oil drilling, they're still drilling. They're not pumping, but they're drilling. They have over 4,000 wells that they've drilled that they're ready to put online when the prices go up. So that's going to flood more product on the market. So they're desperate to keep it going. It's the same thing with the shipping industry. You know, the big CapEx ships, they need like $20,000 to break even a day. They're floating a ship, rather. They're floating them out at $4,300. They'll do anything to keep it going. They'll keep producing and producing. They're driving us into a global recession. It's proven by the deflationary pressures. Deflation equals depression. You have a depression in prices, a depression in economies. Look what's going on in Brazil. That economy is now heading toward depression. Look at Venezuela, rich in oil, poor in dough, 200% inflation rate. Look at Africa, rich in resources, not when they're selling for pennies on the dollar. The rand has declined 10% in one day. You go around the world, Ghana, Congo, Niger. Again, Gary, all these things are connected. All things are connected, Chief Seattle allegedly said.
Let's talk about what's happening in the Middle East right now, because we're seeing...
I am, and that's what I wanted to get to. Well, it's connected.
The conflict, let's talk about the conflict now that's rising between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And of course, we see Russia working with Assad to destroy ISIS and beat back the Western-backed rebels there. And of course, we see the complete destabilization of Libya thanks to Hillary Clinton and Obama funding the revolution there. Of course, ISIS has now taken a foothold in Libya. But let's talk about what's happening there in the Middle East. All this unrest, how does that relate, and how is it?
You see, this is what I was saying. It's all related. Because when I was mentioning all these countries like Congo, Niger, Algeria, what you have on top of the refugee crisis caused by all the bombings, the migrant crisis is being caused by the declining economies. Now you have all that pressure building into the Middle East, spreading into Europe, which brings us to the other trends. And one of them is human waves like we've never seen before. Go back to the refugee crisis because of the bombings. Go back to World War II, the worst refugee crisis, what, in 100 years? 2.3 billion people on the planet. Guess what? We've added 5 billion more. So now you're going to have a refugee crisis on top of an economic crisis, on top of expanding wars with Saudi Arabia bombing Yemen, with the Russians, of course, now, and the United States and their allies in Syria, with Libya in total turmoil because, quote, Gaddafi has to go, folks. And you have Iraq disintegrating. The Taliban are taking over Afghanistan again. Saudi Arabia, you have to keep connecting these. Go back to oil prices. They need $100 a barrel to break even. Go back to the Arab Spring when the Middle East was on fire. Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, every one of them flooded a lot of dough into their economies to shut the people up and to keep them down. They can't do that anymore. Now you're seeing unrest growing in Saudi Arabia, in Bahrain. It's going to continue to spread. And then I forgot, Turkey. Go back to June. Erdogan loses the election. He ramps up the war against the Kurds. Now that's spreading. Bombs away in Istanbul. So you're seeing the world is on the verge of a world war, even though, quote, Obama says that anybody that says that don't know what they're talking about, folks.
Meanwhile, we see Kim Jong-un, he's declared he's detonated a hydrogen bomb, a micro hydrogen bomb. And then we're seeing South Korea, they're putting their propaganda speakers back on the border. We're launching B-52s with South Korea. We see the Japanese are also doing patrols now, and they're building up their own artificial islands in the South China Sea as well. I mean, it's getting crazy over there. Let's shift focus now to Asia. How does that whole situation play into this?
Well, again, what you have to go back to the economy on this. Because who are you have these declining currencies and declining trade. Every month the trade numbers coming out of China, both imports and exports, they keep going down. A continuous streak of down on imports, down on exports. Who's exporting into them? Who are they importing from? South Korea, Japan, Indonesia, Singapore. So all these countries are going down, their economies are going down, and now you're having more and more geopolitical tensions increase. You know my saying. When all else fails, they take you to war. Mm-hmm. You have currency wars, you're hearing it, trade wars developed from the currency wars, and world wars. It's an old pattern. The crash of 1929, the Great Depression, currency wars, trade wars, world war. The Panic of '08, the Great Recession, currency wars, trade wars, world war. So what happened just a couple of days ago? Over there in the Philippines, they just passed a new law. The judges said it's okay to bring back them American troops and them American bases and put them in the Philippines. Just what we need.
Wow. Well, it certainly looks like we are on the edge of World War III. In fact, when I saw Russia take action over there in Syria, I said, you know what? It's on. It's happening. We're watching the early stages of it right now. So let's talk about the Chinese yuan, the American dollar, the Federal Reserve rate hike. How has that affected it?
Well, the yuan is declining for good reasons. You know, it's not being manipulated down as much as it is being driven down because of the realities going on. They created a quantitative easing bubble that dwarfs what the United States did and what Japan did and what Europe is doing. So they created a housing bubble. Now they created that equity market bubble that we see it gone down 60% in a year. You know, and then I love this language, by the way. You watch it on these TV business shows, saying, you know, the Chinese government doesn't have the skills and the tools to deal with these declining equity markets. You hear it all the time, right? Yeah. What skills and tools? You mean they don't know how to commies don't know how to rig it as good as they do over here in the States? You mean their plunge protection team and all the insiders there doing the deals from the Federal Reserve and the government to keep this phony game going? You mean those commies didn't get as skilled as the fascists? So, I mean, what a bunch of crap. They're out of control over there, just as it is over here. How could you have a plunge protection team? Yeah, plunge this. You're playing the markets. Free markets are supposed to take the lead, but no, we're going to have circuit breakers, and guess what? We're going to make up rules as we want because, hey, it's us. We're the white shoe boys from Wall Street. Those commies got to learn better from us.
Well, let's talk about some of the quote-unquote solutions that the Fed is going to be putting out this year. Do you think the Fed will fight the next bear market with negative interest rates and the QE4?
It's very possible. And they're already putting out the trial balloons on negative interest rates. And they're not going to help.
For our viewers at home, real quick, could you explain what negative interest rates are?
Yeah, you put money in the bank, and it costs you to put it in there. You want to buy a German bond? I like you, Gary. I got a bond for you. We're going to give you what we call a negative yield. That's right. What you pay for the bond, money you loan me by buying my bond, I'm going to give you back less when you turn it in in 10 years. You can't make this up. In Switzerland, what they're doing is they're telling people, don't pay your taxes right away, and you will not be fined if you pay them late. We'll take the fine off. Because I'm not making this up, because when we get your money and we put it in the bank, we have to pay the bank to keep it there.
That's insanity.
It's insanity. It has never been done in the history of the world.
It sounds like a Nigerian email scam.
What?
It sounds like a Nigerian email scam. We've got millions of dollars here for you, but you got to give us $5,000 to access it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mean those are scams? You mean that Russian girl that wants to meet me is a scam too?
So what do you make of QE4, and how is it going to differ from past QEs we've seen?
We have to go back and look at the facts here, Gary. And the facts show with the Fed minutes, and again, in this quote, freedom and democracy land that we live in, these criminal bankers, these private banks that are running the show, don't have to let us see the minutes until 5 years later so people forget what actually happened. You go back and read the minutes, they didn't have a clue what was going on. They're making this stuff up as they're going along. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to make up another game with a lot of arrogance and attitude as they say it. But they don't know what they're doing. They're out of bullets. And that's why we believe this is, by the way, in 2007, in November, I took out the domain name, the Panic of '08. Oddly enough, 8 years later, again on December 30th, we came out with the Panic of 2016. We're in panic conditions. And when you're in panic conditions and you didn't see the panic coming, the decisions you're going to make will probably be the wrong ones.
Now, let's talk about the real estate market quickly here. Has the real estate market affected retail stores like Macy's? They're going to be closing down stores. They're going to lay off 1,000 employees. GE just also announced they're going to be laying off 1,000 workers in Europe. Are we seeing the beginning of massive layoffs across, not just the United States, but across the globe?
Yes, it's also happening because of the mergers and acquisitions. You're losing about 6,300 workers from DuPont with the merger with Dow. And you're going to keep seeing this going on and over and over. And that's part of it. The other one is these multinationals have become too big. So their profit margins are very thin. And once they start losing, they start collapsing. So they've expanded much too fast. And this is very interesting, by the way. I've been in this business since 1980. You look at Christmas retail sales. What were they?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, they were down. Everything was down at the end of last year.
But you said you don't know. And that's very important because they always come out and flood the media with what the Christmas sales were.
Yeah, they always do brag, hey, sales are up. But this year, it was pretty quiet.
It's very quiet. And what you're getting are only pieces. The sales stink.
Well, I remember hearing about it too in the stores. People saying everything was a sale from the fall. Everything was clearanced. It was a very weird Christmas season, that's for sure.
Exactly. So retail sales are way off. You're seeing a collapse happening in front of our eyes. It's worldwide. You're looking at luxury brands from China to the United States, from the UK to Russia. It's all going down. You're looking at currencies crashing. I was back in the day in 1997 with the currency crisis in Asia. What's going on with the currencies now is unprecedented. And it's not making the news as it was back then. You're looking at recessions going on in Russia, in Argentina, in Brazil, one country after another, these resource-rich countries, again, tying it all together. As these resource-rich countries who borrowed all of this money when quantitative easing was flooding it out, and not only the countries, but the corporations in the emerging markets, now they have to pay it back. And they have to pay it back with increasing dollars as their currencies decline. You want to see a bond bubble explode? You want to see defaults? You're going to see a crash that will be recorded in history as worse than the crash of 1929 on a global basis.
Gerald, let's jump over to Obamacare now. The Obamacare costs now are set to spike for tens of thousands of Americans. Will Obamacare finally implode in 2016 before hopefully it's repealed?
I don't know. It has imploded already. It's hurting a lot of people. When you look at the deductibles with the bronze and silver and gold and whatever they want to call these things, the deductibles are enormous for people that can't afford the high quality care. So, I mean, they're coming in at, several $1,000s before you start getting money back. Then put on top of that what's going on with all these drug prices that are ballooning as those mergers and acquisitions keep getting worse. The entire healthcare system is a disaster. They're keeping people alive. I know someone whose relative is very ill. It's cost over almost $1 million this past year. I'm not making that up. It was like $987,000 to keep this person alive who is virtually dead already.
So basically, they're milking the American people. They're milking the insurance companies by extended care, is what you're saying?
Well, it's bigger than that. It's because of what's happened to the whole system. And again, you go back to one of my books, Trends 2000, that I actually wrote in '96, and I talked about how it all changed. Again, it was Clinton with the HMOs. And that started, I call it like a Walmart of healthcare. And that's the quality that we got, Walmart quality. So it's been going down since then, and the more it becomes merged, the more major companies that control everything, the worse it's going to get. So the whole system has to change. But it goes back again, Gary, to the system. And right now, the system is a criminally operated system. And, I joke around and I say things, but when I say what I have to say, I'm not saying it sarcastically. The Republicans and Democrats are criminal organizations no different than the Bloods and the Crips. They steal our money in names of too big to fail, tax breaks, loan guarantees, and inside deals for their buddies. Everybody knows it. Tell me a state you live in, and I could show you the fraud and corruption going on. They're thieves, and they're murderers. How many more people do they have to kill around the world in the name of freedom, democracy, and RDD, right to defend, R2D, humanitarian missions? The United States has killed over 1 million people in Iraq, and depending on whose reports you read, almost 2 million in Afghanistan, 30,000 in Libya. You have 250,000 dead in Syria, thanks to the United States and its coalition of the killing that is supporting the, quote, moderate rebels. I'm sure you have a couple of moderate rebels living next to you. We all know exactly who they are and what they look like. So what I'm saying to you, going back to the whole issue of healthcare, education, jobs, one after another, How could anyone expect any positive results when you have the Bloods and the Crips running Washington?
Well, I think we'll leave it at that, folks. This has been Gerald Celente. You want to weigh in on some of these topics, go right ahead and hit the comment section and go on over to Gerald's website. Gerald, shoot out that website real quick.
Trendsresearch.com, trendsresearch.com. And Gary, not only do we publish the Trends Journal, was it 54 pages, full color, no ads, we also put out a Trends Monthly, Trends This Week, each weekday night, Trends in the News. We have conferences. Guaranteed, it's the only place where you're going to read and hear history before it happens. Trendsresearch.com.
All right, folks, you heard it here at the Next News Network, trendsresearch.com. Leave your thoughts below in the comments section. Hit that subscribe button, and we will bring you updates on this and many other topics that affect your freedoms here at home and abroad. For the Next News Network, I'm Gary Franchi.
Badass shirt now available. Link in the description.